Several years ago, I had one of those magical moments of epiphany that you read about and that you hope will always happen to you someday. At the time, I was working in a very close advisory capacity with a very large, very successful Asian corporation. And normally, I have more ideas than I know what to do with. In this particular instance, I was at a loss. I was struggling in a project, and I'd come up against a brick wall, and I was completely rudderless. I had no idea what to tell them to do. I was completely out of ideas, which, when you are hired to help with ideas, is not a good thing. And I guess that I wasn't very good at hiding exactly how useless I was feeling at the time, because I came into the conference room where I was working, and taped to the back of the chair that I worked from was a little piece of 2,500-year-old Chinese wisdom. It goes something like this. 30 spokes share the wheel's hub. It's the center hole that makes it useful. Shape clay into a vessel. It's the space within that makes it useful. Cut doors and windows for a room. It's the holes that make it useful. Therefore, profit comes from what is there, usefulness from what is not there. Now, my first reaction to this was that someone wants me gone. I'd be more useful that way. But it made me stop and think, and it did a couple of things. First of all, it made me think more about the gentleman who wrote this piece of poetry. I picked up the book, and I found another piece of wisdom. To attain knowledge, add things every day. To attain wisdom, subtract things every day. And that actually piqued my curiosity, so that I began to think more and more about this notion of subtracting things. And it turns out that this ancient wisdom has some scientific support in modern science. Subtraction actually requires different wiring, utilizes different wiring in the brain under functional magnetic resonance imaging. While it's the same general part of the brain that's activated, the neurochemical transmitters and the electrical stimulation is slightly different. And it wasn't so much an epiphany that I got this flash of genius idea around. It was more of a revelation, more of a mind shift. And to give you a sense sort of that experience, I thought I'd show you this, give you a chance to see if you can figure out what it is. There's three sets of perpendicular lines here. And what you are looking at here, actually, is something so ubiquitous that you'd be hard-pressed to make it through an entire day without using it several times. Now, don't shout out what it is, okay, because there's a lot of information missing here. I would like to see, though, a show of hands if you know exactly what it is you're looking at. Okay, a few of us. Now, I'm going to give you a hint. And once I give you that hint, you're going to see these lines in a completely different way. You ready? What you're looking at is the uppercase version of the most widely used letter in the English language. And it is a capital E. A capital E. Where does it exist? Where does it exist? In the white space. Who created it? Well, you did. Right? Now, here's the trick. Here's the trick. I would like you to unsee the E. Go back to the way you were just a few seconds ago. It's very, very difficult to do. But this isn't a parlor trick. This is, in fact, the power of subtraction. It wasn't just a willy-nilly cut of some space out of lines that make up the capital E. It was a very thoughtful, very artful, very intelligent way of subtracting material, so that it actually created a mind shift for you. And what I thought I'd do is to share with you a few of the stories that I've collected, because this actually allowed me to complete my project at this particular organization. I started thinking about subtracting things rather than adding them, and it allowed me to complete the project. But more importantly, it sent me off on a quest that I've been on for about a dozen years, trying to track down ideas, solutions that gain more impact when you remove something from them. So I'm going to do a quick tour here, because this is, you might be thinking, well, that's an optical illusion, Matt, that really doesn't have much application to my life, my work, my workaday role in the business community. So let me share with you a couple of ideas. Are you familiar with the FedEx logo? Of course you are. Are you familiar with the secret part of the FedEx logo? Right? It is the hidden arrow. Yes, my daughter, 10 years old, never fails when we see the logo on a truck to say, there goes the secret arrow that no one on my gymnastics team can see. Interestingly enough, the inventor of this, the designer, Lyndon Leader, I got to speak with, and it happened by accident, but interestingly enough, only 2 out of about the 20 executives who first saw this design saw that hidden arrow there. So there's a direct application of how that notion of subtracting the right material can actually transform an idea. All right? Fine, that's a graphical illustration. Give me another one. You remember the ending to The Sopranos? Those of you who might have been a fan of The Sopranos, some of you are applauding. Yeah, it was a great series, ran for 8 years. But what was significant about The Sopranos was that it ended without an ending. 2 years before The Sopranos ended, the creator, David Chase, announced to the world that he was going to end the series. And there was a big buildup and a brouhaha around that particular ending. But David Chase was faced with a very, very difficult problem. He faced an actual dilemma. If he killed off his main character, who was a very loosely organized criminal, he alienated half of his audience. If he allowed that particular bad person to live, he alienated the other half. And at the same time, if he got rid of this main character, because everybody wanted to know, would Tony Soprano, the main character, get whacked mob style? That was the big issue. If he got rid of him, there goes his chance for a major motion picture. So what did he do? Well, we're all watching that show on a Sunday evening just before the end, and there's a big build-up, dramatic scene, the tension is high, and all of a sudden, everyone's screen goes absolutely black, and everyone shouts down the hall, "Did you pay the cable bill?" We did not see it, and the interesting thing is we did not see it as the ending, but everyone had the same reaction, much like that letter E exercise a few seconds ago. Right? And the interesting thing is the 12 million initial viewers on that Sunday evening became 36 million viewers by the middle of that week, because David Chase, within 24 hours, came out and said everything you need to know about the end to Tony Soprano is in that episode. He had embedded clues, much like that letter E strategy. And people went back once, twice, 3 times to figure out their own ending, and within the week, triple the number of viewers, triple the impact, and 3 distinct endings emerged on YouTube, all with very logical arguments for why their ending was the right ending. And okay, that's fine. So that's television. Well, give me another idea. Give me something practical, something tangible, something that's more. Okay, here you go. This is my bicycle seat. I spend 10 to 12 hours when I can on a bicycle. Let me tell you that what isn't there is life-saving. It's a $300 item built in Italy, and it quite frankly makes riding a bicycle very enjoyable. But really, this is the notion of what isn't there being quite more important, actually, than what is there. Are you familiar with this? This is a Toyota Scion. This is the original model of the Toyota Scion. It's kind of an XB. It looks, actually, when I first saw this, I thought, gosh, I guess a toaster got together with a milk truck and had babies. It just doesn't look like anything my age, something that a person my age would want to purchase. It just looks like a toaster or something. But interestingly enough, Toyota recognized that their customer base was slipping away. And so they went out into the marketplace. They attended, of all things, raves and urban art shows and extreme sporting events. And they determined that Gen Y, which is their future customer base, really was about one thing: personalization and customization. And they built a very, very spare car, a $15,000 car, stripping out all the normal options from it, but making them available as aftermarket items. Kids would buy this car for $15,000 and put that much again into the car. Carbon dashes, flat panel TVs. Where I live in Southern California, you could go on any given Saturday morning to see 10 of these lined up with the hatchbacks open, and it wasn't about the car, it was about what was left out of the car and what people did to the car. Another good example of selective subtraction, making things that much more effective and impactful. I was in Sweden 2007, trying to collect ideas, and I was speaking at an event, an all-day event, and I said to my sponsors, do you got anything in this area that I could look at where something has been removed, something has been subtracted, and a greater result or more impact has been achieved? And they said, well, you got to go to Holland. I said, okay, why do I have to go to Holland? Well, because they've gotten rid of traffic controls. Okay? Well, it's true. In about 400 European towns, they have removed and redesigned high traffic intersections to be completely void or nearly void of all traditional traffic controls, signs, lights. And when you come into these intersections, it's completely uncertain, completely ambiguous, and you have no choice but to do what? Slow down and look at people and use your noggin. They've redesigned it so that the curbs are the same level as the street. There are trees and fountains out where you think you should be driving. There's sidewalk seating right where you think you should be driving. Interesting, you know what? Let me show you. Let me show you what this looks like. Crazy, right? Traffic flow is doubled, the number of accidents cut in half. They use this, it's called share space design, and they use this methodology and this mindset to redesign Exhibition Road for the London 2012 Games. It's the cultural mecca of London. It was not a user-friendly place, and they redesigned it using the concepts of what's called shared space design. And the only rule in place there is to be careful of those most vulnerable. That's the only rule. No controls, no traffic signage other than that. When you remove just the right amount of information, you can actually engage someone's imagination, just like I did with that letter E exercise. One of the reasons that people believe that the Mona Lisa changes her smile every time that you look at her, there's no secret code to this. Leonardo da Vinci came up with a technique that before he came up with it, most paintings looked very still. They were too perfect and not lifelike. What he did was to purposefully make the corners of the Mona Lisa's mouth and the corners of her eyes indistinct and blurry. It's called sfumato. And what happens is, I don't know if you've ever seen been to the Louvre to see the actual Mona Lisa, but I did. I took a couple of turns each time around the Louvre to see if I could actually make her change her expression. In fact, she did. The first time she just looked like a regular smile. By the third time, she was mocking me. And what happens is, because it's indistinct, is we inject ourselves into that painting, and she takes on whatever mood that we're thinking about. So we become the co-creator. We become part and parcel to the artistry. And another version of that is, and I don't know if you're fans of comic books or not, but Comic-Con recently happened down in San Diego, 150,000 people plus there. The magic of comic books occurs where? Not in the panels that the artist draws. It occurs in what's called the gutter, in the white space. In this particular, and this is drawn by Scott McCloud, who wrote a wonderful book and is a TED speaker called Understanding Comics. The magic is in the white space between the panels, because while he drew the criminal and he drew the knife, he did not plunge the knife. He did not tell you exactly how hard that knife hit, and he didn't tell you exactly who died, if anyone did. All we see is the before and after, and you fill in the blanks. The magic of comics is in the white space. It's in what isn't there, and your imagination is thus engaged. And do you know that Apple used this the very first time they came out with the first iPhone back in 2007? I don't know if you remember when Steve Jobs stood up at Macworld in January of 2007 to introduce this thing that was missing something. What was it? The keyboard. But that wasn't the most fascinating thing about the iPhone. What was most fascinating was that this was thought to be the most hyped technological gadget gizmo product to come down the pike in an awful long time. But if you go back and if you look at what to hype something means, to market something, to push something through publicity, through promotion, there was radio silence between January and June when it went on sale. There was no advertising, there was no press, there was no publicity. Walt Mossberg of the Wall Street Journal could not get his hands on an advanced handset. Pricing, there was no pricing promotion whatsoever. It went on sale at a synchronized time. 20 million people expressed interest in buying an iPhone before it tipped. It tipped before it ever went on sale. What happened was people filled in the blanks. The blogosphere went nuts, and they filled in all the suppositions of what that thing was actually going to be, what was it going to do, what was it going to look like, feel like, and act. Interestingly enough, radio silence is what made that iPhone so successful. And here in California, I'm sure you're familiar with, and if you're not, you need to go out and visit it, the In-N-Out Burger drive-through. The In-N-Out Burger invented the drive-through burger stand. I don't know if you're aware of that back in 1946. What's interesting about In-N-Out Burger for me is the mystique that they've been able to create around their menu. What you're looking at here is the menu that they started with 60 plus years ago. They've never changed it. It's 4 items and 4 items only with some drinks. Or is it? There is a secret menu that's got 4 times the number of items on there. But who created it? Customers. The interesting thing here is their restraint, and that the constraint that they've imposed on not touching their menu, but following a very simple rule, which is we'll do anything you want to a hamburger, has allowed them to create this mystique and this standardized menu. As a matter of fact, you go there and you order a Flying Dutchman or a protein style or animal style. It actually shows up on your ticket with that there. They have actually incorporated the ideas of their customers and standardized them. What all of these ideas really, I think, have in common is that they break a pattern. They break a pattern and create a new pattern in your brain, much like I did with that letter E. And sometimes break is really an important part of a breakthrough. Interesting experiment was run not too long ago with a consulting firm by the name of Boston Consulting Group. And what they decided to do was to test the idea of whether you could be more productive by taking time off, subtracting out work from your work schedule. They took a series of teams, consultant teams, and you know consultants, they 80 hours a week, and they said you have to have mandatory time off, one scheduled mandatory time off during the week where you cannot touch your BlackBerry, you cannot have any work contact, no email, no phone contact. Please find something to do other than work. And it made a lot of people quite nervous. They thought they were missing out on the good projects. They thought, oh my gosh, now I'm going to have to work on the weekend. What actually happened was the inter-team communication became more effective. Their work product became better according to their clients. And their entire firm now has adopted this time off, this break from work as a firm-wide strategy. And I learned a very powerful lesson about the notion of doing nothing or doing less from a gentleman by the name of Boyd Mattson, who is a National Geographic adventure journalist. Perhaps you've seen some of his shows or read his articles. And his lesson was this: stand still when the hippos charge. Very difficult thing to do. You're on a safari, you're taking a picture of Mama Hippo, and she decides that she doesn't like how you're looking at her calf, and she charges. Our instinct is to do something. It's to run, basically. If you do that, you will die. I don't care how fast you run the 100. She can outrun you. Your only chance at survival, and I don't know how he tested this out, is to stand there and do nothing. It reverses the age-old saying of, don't just stand there, do something. Well, it's don't just do something, stand there. So these are just a short collection of some of the ideas that I think represent a mind shift. You see, whenever we're faced with a critical decision, an important decision, we come up against 3 choices: what to leave in versus what to leave out, what to pursue versus what to ignore, and what to do versus what to don't. Now, most of us only focus on the first half of each of those questions: what to do, what to leave in, what to pursue. We don't necessarily focus on the second half. And that's where the subtractive part comes in. And if you take a look at all those ideas and try and boil them down into a fistful of takeaways, the first one is this: what isn't there can often trump what is. The second one is that the simplest rules create the most effective experience. The third one is that limiting information engages the imagination. The fourth is that creativity thrives under intelligent constraints. The fifth, break is the important part of breakthrough. And the last one, doing something isn't always better than doing nothing. And these are the laws of subtraction. And if you think about it, all of us face a very, very difficult version of that 2,000-pound hippo every day, whether it's your competitor, whether it's society in general, or the fact that we are living in a world of really excess everything. Right? Between the push notifications and the tweets and the emails and the meetings and the people popping into your office, there's very little time to be focused and clear about anything. Everything, every experience that we have seems to be somehow confusing, overwhelming, hazardous, hard to use, in fact, even ugly. Right? And all but the best experiences seem to have that certain elegance where the maximum effect is achieved with the minimum means. But that's what the laws of subtraction can help you to do, is to achieve that kind of effectiveness. And if I had to pinpoint just one takeaway idea that sort of wraps up this entire chat, it's this. When you remove just the right things in just the right way, something very good happens. So thank you very much. The floor is yours. Reactions, comments, discussion, what did you think?